My name's Tom Christie. Welcome to Civics Sundays, a video of the Civics Project. We're working every week to get better at this, so thanks for bearing with us. Each week we want to talk about a topic specific to civics, society, especially specific to the city of Niagara Falls, which will be our focus in all things civics. If we focus on one thing, we might be able to really understand the one thing and then take it larger. So that's why we're going to focus on one community only, the city of Niagara Falls. Having said all that, one of the things that I've heard my whole life, and I'm sure everyone has, it's like Kleenex or Jell-O, the words block club. I've seen it everywhere, every city I've ever traveled to. I also don't know what it is. So I reached out to a bunch of people in the last couple of weeks and found out some things about it and found out a lot of people that didn't know about it. So the people that did know about it, we brought in this morning, and one of them is Ruth Cooper, Bob Pascal. Is it Bob? I'm sorry. I want to say Cole for your last name.
It is Pascal. Mm-hmm.
Pascal. Huh? Bob Pascal and Sheila Zuni have joined us today, and they have various different experiences with block clubs, but we'll learn about that. So Ruth, let me go to you first because you're the first person I ever called on this. All right. Thanks for coming.
Good morning, and thanks for contacting us. I'm part of the Memorial Park neighborhood, which is down in the core neighborhood. So we're around the hospital from like 9th and Portage and Walnut to Niagara Street. We're basically the only neighborhood that's really left down here.
Right. If people aren't from Niagara Falls, when you take the Grand Island Bridge, the Robert Moses, and you enter the city, you either go straight into the straight park or you take a right and you end up near the casino. If you go to that end of that road, that's really beginning of Memorial Park, right?
Yes.
But most people know where you are. We just don't call it that.
Right. Well, it used to be 11th Street, and they changed it because apparently there was some, I guess 11th Street at one time was kind of like the red light district. So they tried to change the, back in 2009, when they adopted the comprehensive plan, they decided to change 11th Street to Memorial Park neighborhood.
Right.
So that's how that came to be.
So with my rambling intro, can you sort of give me a 1 or 2 minute, what is a block club?
Well, these are new to us too. I mean, I'm not from the area. We used to have neighborhood associations, and they basically are the same thing. It's just a group of people that care about what's going on within the city, within their neighborhood. Up here, the block clubs were more for crime fighting. And dealing with, I would say, like dealing with like some of the clean neighborhood conditions. They would do an annual cleanup, but they didn't really work on any true like political things. And when I say political, I mean like anything bipartisan. Like they really didn't work on like holding people accountable, like whether it was elected officials or our, city workers accountable for, basic city services, etc.
Right.
So, I mean, that's basically what we were introduced to. Our block club is one of the oldest. It actually is one of the first block clubs that sprang off of the business association on Pine Avenue. So it's been around for a good 30 years or more.
Right. Ruth, hold that thought for a minute. Bob, what do you know of block clubs? How did you get invested? I know Ruth just said, I'm not from here. That's funny because she's been there 20 or 30 years, and that's how we come. She wasn't born on 3rd Street.
Right.
She says that. But, are you a Niagara Falls native, born and bred? And what do you know about block clubs?
My wife is born and bred here, and she left probably in her 20s, and we came back because of both her parents were here and economic opportunity, believe it or not. I had owned a pay telephone company, and that was just going by the wayside. So we came here, saw the casino, we started buying some income property. And unlike California, it actually cash flows because it's so darn cheap. But there's a price you pay for that, and that is um, a certain tenants will destroy your property. And so I started getting involved. I started hearing from Norma Higgs, if we can use names,
Sure.
because these are the people that I work with. Back in 2004, I hooked up with the Landlord Association, and I met um, Norma through there, and I found out there was such, I don't want to say vitriol, but it's like I was already put into a category of a certain of a person that I didn't really like, which is like a slumlord. So we started to open up a dialogue, and we talked, and before you know it, it's like, then she started to come around to the fact that there are some good landlords and some bad, and the same way with the tenants. So I kind of got involved with block clubs that way. Um, Norma would come to me with a certain problem. For example, we'd get there was a property on the corner of 8th and Pine, and they wanted to put a rooming house in there. So we would organize and get people to come to the city council meeting and express our viewpoints. We did that when they put a lot of the low income housing up at the north end. So that's how I kind of got involved, and that's how I got involved with politics, because you eventually you start getting frustrated. You figure, okay, well, let me see if I can affect change on the inside, and that's how I got involved with block clubs. We were sort of an unlikely match or fit in the very beginning, until we started to have dialogue and work together.
Yeah. Thank you, Bob. I don't know if Sheila can hear us. She hasn't been able to yet. We're having a little technical issue there. Sheila, I don't think you can hear us. If you do, just interrupt. We'd love to hear your experience as well. But Bob, let me just follow up. How you came to block clubs because it made economic sense. You had an issue, you talked to somebody, and all of a sudden you're organized and you're talking. Is that how it works? Is it that formal? Do you need a permit to own a block club? I mean, how do you start one? How do you get into one?
Ruth is probably better to answer something like that, because I've never started one. I got more involved with the Landlord Association, and then worked with block clubs through that, through that association, because it just, without any kind of a voice, landlords were sort of demonized. And so I just wanted to be part of a different kind of narrative where, that people could understand what our, what the things that we face. So yeah, I used to bring in speakers. Norma was a speaker. When we had our association meetings, it was open to the public. So in a way, we weren't a block club, but we were open like that. And we discussed, different problems. And then we would also ask for the support of the block clubs. We started a couple of initiatives with social services, all had to do with quality of life. It all had to do with our housing stock, trying to get the message out that, wait a minute, I've got a property in a neighborhood, and I'm just as affected as a landlord by a landlord next to me that isn't behaving properly, that's letting their property get run down. So then the whole idea of enforcement, I mean, it just once that started, it's just like it opened up a whole bunch of stuff. And all of a sudden, before you know it, we're not just talking about landlord issues, we're talking about quality of life and, the conditions of the street. And that just because you might live in a poor neighborhood and you don't have a lot of money, it doesn't mean that you have to be subjected to the crime and the filth and the trash. There's a lot of people that are really decent working people, and they're subjected. They're sort of like trapped there. You know what I mean?
Bob, where did you grow up, or where are you from?
Well, I was born in Massachusetts, and my father was a contract engineer. So every 3 years we moved. I graduated from high school in Schenectady. I've lived in New Jersey, Nevada, Denver, San Diego, Ohio.
And what do you think of Western New York or the Falls?
Oh, I
was. Oh, that was enough of an answer. Oh, book it. Stamp that answer.
Yeah.
What was that guttural? Right, Sheila, welcome. I think it's Sheila. We've got Sheila on twice there, but I see your video now, Sheila. But we don't hear your audio. Bob, what was that guffaw you made?
Well, I mean, it just when I first got here, we moved to San Diego, my wife and I, in 1988. And to compare, I mean, just the difference between San Diego, which is one of the cleanest cities, and it's right by the ocean, it's beautiful, it's sunny. You come here and you'll see people walking on the street with no teeth. And that's from, I learned a lot of things, like crack ruins teeth. And I'm wondering what the Swisher Sweet wrapper's doing there. You know, it's for a blunt. I never heard about a blunt before. I got an education that I'd never had before.
Mhm.
And it really all stemmed around poverty.
Mhm.
So yeah, when I came here, it was culture shock, just the way that what I saw. Just when my brother came to visit me in 2004, when I was working on this major renovation of one of the buildings downtown, he and his wife were actually afraid. We drove down Main Street and they're looking at me and I could see in their face. And that's what I saw. You know, that's what I saw. That's what they saw. You know,
Wow.
this is a shock to come here and live here.
Wow. But you're here.
Yeah, we're here. And yeah, we've been here for a long time. We're considering, but yet, like Ruth, I feel like I'm an outsider, and you just, I don't know if you can ever really be. And that's a thing right there. If this city really expects to grow, it needs to get fresh people. It needs new people. Seth Piccarello, I think he did it. He tried anyway, when he was getting involved with that fund where you would give a college graduate a certain amount of money if they lived here for a little bit of time. It was an attempt to bring young people in. But see, there's a perfect example. They got here and I told them, I says, you better have some kind of support group, because they're not going to, and they didn't last very long because they were in shock and it just didn't work for them. So until we can change the way the city looks and acts, we're going to have a hard time attracting young people or working people, or, you know what I mean? It's just, it's so deep, Tom.
Yeah. Well, okay. So two things though, Bob. I gotta shut you up for a second, but
Right.
no, I mean, I just have to, I want to say hi to Sheila, but two things. One, you're absolutely right. And two, we have to fix it. Like, there might not be an answer, but we have to keep doing it. We have to, and we just have to. That's where I am, at least with the Civics Project, is one, we have to understand what the problem is, and then we have to fix it. And it being, I want to be San Diego. I want to be somewhere else. There's no reason there's zero reason we shouldn't be. So anyway, I'm sorry. Let me interrupt it. Sheila, how are you?
Very good. Thank you.
Thanks for coming.
Yeah, thanks. Hey, Bob.
Hi, Sheila.
Hey, Sheila, before I was just going to go back to Ruth, but we were talking about what's a block club? I don't even know. Do you have what's your 2-minute answer to that kind of question?
Well, I consider my district the Rainbow Connection district. So my block club is Rainbow Connection. And what I have found is my neighborhood is a bunch of poor people who've been pushed here because the rent is practically nothing, because the buildings are completely decrepit. So, for example, I have 3 houses on my street that really make me cry. I do everything I can to promote my Airbnb business, to have a beautiful, clean property. And I'm surrounded by people who really don't care. They don't care. Tom, Niagara University thought that they could magically come into my region and clean up. And so they got 150 volunteers to scour the neighborhood and clean everything up. In 3 days, it's going to be right back. Because one, most of the people around me have problems. They either have a financial problem, a drug problem, an abuse problem, or they're mentally disturbed. They're not people who are going to go out and be productive, hardworking citizens, because they're lost souls. And so, for example, the house right next to me is a Pescrillo house. It never gets improved. It just has a turnover of more and more tenants who are more unfortunate every time around. It becomes less and less of a hope that it's ever going to change. The house next to it has been completely abandoned. It's filthy. It's got trash all over the front, the alley, the back. And I am losing hope because I know it's going to look like that all summer. Nobody is taking responsibility for that house. So for me, a block club is enlisting my people on my street, maybe getting a petition signed that we can address the 3 houses around me and why we have to put up with filth.
Well, so
I mean, filth. I mean, dirty diapers on the lawn, stuff like that.
So, you know, I don't want to relate this to anything else unimportant, but we talked about tourism a couple of weeks ago, and there is no one person who you can call and say, hey, I got a good tourism idea. Like, there's no official. We pay,
Right.
you know, all
And we
these
come
people.
up with ideas all the time.
Is there no person that you call and say, look, this house is got dirty diapers in the yard. You've got to come. Is there no one in the city that does that? I mean, obviously it hasn't happened. So you don't even have to answer that. If they were doing it, it would be done.
Right.
So block clubs tend to bring people together and
Well,
say,
block clubs can create a force. Because if enough people in one region put up a voice, remember, Bob, how we did with the methadone clinic on 6th Street?
Yeah.
You know, they wanted to put a methadone clinic right at the end of the street where I have an Airbnb, in the middle of a place that after the master plan was designated a tourist region. What? You know, why would we want to bring that in? Plus, they had already built low-income housing for women and children. So that's not a good idea for them either. And the city basically comes up with real bad ideas all the time. And I'm thinking there's got to be a way to come up with simpler, easy, nice little situations where people can, well, first of all, walk safely in my neighborhood. And feel like they belong. I think a secret for Niagara Falls would be if we could establish neighborhood identities. This is the Rainbow District. This is the, Weedville, or this is,
Well, let me ask this of Bob and Ruth as well, where we just went through this with like the asphalt plant, you know, pick the thing. And people have to rise up and spend so much energy to stop one specific thing. And you guys have mentioned 1 or 2 projects. You've done that too as well, which must have taken all your energy for months, and you maybe succeeded. Why do you have, what's a tipping point where that doesn't have to happen anymore? Like enough of us are active that just doesn't even come to be. You know, there isn't a methadone clinic suggested.
Yeah, I don't know, except
asphalt plant suggested.
I don't know where the tipping point is, except to look at Ruth's group, because the Memorial Park Block Club truly was the absolute strongest block club the city's ever seen. And they got so strong that the other block clubs kicked them out. You know, you're a little bit too radical. You're a little.
Well, I think there's a big misconception on what being political is.
Yeah.
And, you know, and the event that she's talking about is how we were introduced to the block club in our area is we won an award for having the best Christmas decorations. And then that spring, I'm going back to 2005, and then that spring, there was a letter on our door, and that there was a homeless shelter opened up on the corner of Ferry and Memorial Park. So they were having, you know, there was a call for a meeting, and we went to the meeting, and there were about, I would say about 40 people there. And I know one of the things that we had asked, you know, one of my questions was, you know, like, well, what's our zoning? What's the zoning code say about this? And I was really surprised that a lot of people didn't even know what a zoning code was. So
I don't even know what a zone is.
right. So I think that, you know, there is a need for civics, you know, like you said, finding out what, you know, who's responsible for what, you know, what do we do in a situation such as this? And over the years, I think that one of the biggest problems is getting people to understand that block clubs should have just as much political clout or leverage as our unions.
It's the
We should-
community voice.
It's a
That's the
community
thing.
voice. We should be able to press the their feet to the fire. And when I say that, I mean your elected officials. We should be able to say, listen, you know, like when you were running for mayor or council, you know, you talked about this, and this. I've spent since 2005 with these, you know, everybody in the Northeast, don't care where it is, every city has an annual cleanup. They have an annual cleanup and that's it. Here, the cleanup is every week. Every week we have to go into our alleyway. Like we have 3 people in our alleyway, 3 men, John's one of them, that go around and have to clean up. They have to clean up in the front, clean up in the back. That's not normal. So how do we, you know, get to the root of the problem? And sometimes I believe it's just no one is in control and no one cares.
Let me ask this, because here's what I always hear. We'll elect the next mayor, you know, the next one will be better. The next city council will be, and you know, I've heard this now since 1981 and it doesn't seem to change. So, you know, you can't necessarily believe in a person. It's the actions or the ethos of what's going on. So we have a new mayor, you know, after 12 years. Is it any different?
Not yet.
No,
I
not
think you
yet.
hit it, though. Yeah, Tom, I think you hit it. Ethos. I've used that word a few times. It's the feeling that you get. It's the culture.
Oh.
And one of the things that you also said that really rang true is that it does take a lot of time and a lot of effort. And one of the reasons why people give up is because when there are special interests, like say low income housing, you'll get people that are paid to show up there at 7 o'clock on a Wednesday night or whenever the council meeting's being held. And you'll show up with your group and and eventually somebody in your group's doing something else. They're not getting paid to do this. And that civic drive starts to wane as it's just going on forever. Here's another example. This is something that just happened with the current administration. There was a property on Memorial Memorial Drive, and it was 424. It's the infamous 424 Memorial. And the council voted, the people purchased the property on a home ownership basis. They couldn't make a go of it, so they sold it to a real estate agent who lives in the city. And that agent should have known better, that there's like a reverter clause. If you aren't going to live there, this special deal for $1,000 to buy this house is supposed to go back to the city. Not once, but twice did it go in front of the council, and council said, no, they're not approving this sale to this private individual because we're not voting. The third time just happened a couple of months ago, and they basically overturned the 2 no's. How many no's do you need before it's no?
Right.
So that's frustrating. And so now tie this in with how much effort it takes to mount these defenses or offenses. Add that to the fact that more and more people who have the ability to leave, who also have the ability to articulate. So now your block clubs are shrinking. Things are just, you've got a brain drain. So eventually, you get to the point where, okay, well, we don't have a really big block club here, there. So let's all combine maybe. And you're looking for solutions. We should almost have like a board. Let's just throw this stuff up on the board. What do we attack, right? You see what I'm saying? Because when we start talking, there's so many things that we have to kind of jot this stuff down. And what should we work on first? So maybe the idea of the block club, which I see getting weaker, then you start saying, well, you got Pine Ave development, and you've got the downtown business. So anybody who's got any kind of a civic association, doesn't have to be a block club. It's like we should all get together. And so instead of having a room with 10 or 15 people, you might have a room with 100, but they might be all, disparate people from different, but they all have the same common interest. There are some things that are just common. Trash in the alleys. There's no punishment for bad behavior. And guess what? That drives people that you want to live here away. It takes the people who are already here, it kicks them out. And anybody new coming, I don't know how I stayed this long, Tom. I really don't. But we needed to do a new thing,
Well, Bob, let me interrupt there and ask you, and then I'm going to ask Ruth and Sheila the exact same question. Is focus. What do you think? It could be anything. Could be the weather. It could be Tuesday. What do you think is the number one problem facing Niagara Falls? Number one issue. I don't even want to say problem. What's the first thing we need to focus on before we can focus on anything else? Tough question. But
the enforcement of bad behavior. If you can't, it's just like if you got parents that say you got to come in at a certain time, it's discipline. There's just no discipline here. So what you end up with a Wild West feeling. I can get away with it because there aren't cops. I can run that stop sign because there aren't police. Nobody really cares. So it becomes like a Wild West. So unless you're prepared to enforce the ordinances you already have on the books, why would you want to go? The most recent one is that short-term rental, where they spent about a year at least creating this ordinance. Then we get a new administration, and what do? Right out of the gate, that like there aren't enough problems. They start on a whole new wasting resources on this short-term rental thing. I don't want to monopolize. So I'll
all right, so that was very important. Enforcing some structure to the city. Sheila, what do you think?
Well, like you said, there's nobody to turn to with ideas, with problems. If we go to code enforcement, in the past, they haven't really cared. If we had a community action director or something like that, it's so simple in a way. I had an attorney that I worked for had a son who was 15, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, who did a website called Complain and Resolve. And he got all of the local municipalities to participate. And when a citizen had a complaint, they went in and put it in. Now, everybody who goes to that site sees the complaint. And the duty of the other participants is try to come up with some solutions, resolve it, try to work it before it gets to a city issue, a legal issue, a disaster.
Yeah. Okay. So Bob said code enforcement or have some structure.
Consequences too.
But we have, I'll just be the other side, right? So we have a couple of cops making $270,000. So Bob, what the hell? So Sheila, you say, there isn't anyone to report anything to. And John Spanbauer was on 2 weeks ago and said 85% of $100 million budget is salaries and benefits. So there's my two. You're both right. And it doesn't seem like we're not throwing money at Sheila's answer, or it doesn't seem like there aren't people around to have Bob's answer. It's maddening. You want to put your head through a cement block. Set that aside. Ruth, what do you think is the number one issue in Niagara Falls?
I believe it's the inability of this city to provide the taxpayer with basic services, such as snow plowing, garbage removal, enforcing their laws. Also, we have a serious lack of any council representation. I was really shocked that we have all councilmen at large. So there's no one. I've had every counselor into my neighborhood and they all, like, oh, this is a shame. Yeah, well, what are you going to do about it? Well, they don't care about my neighborhood, to be honest with you. Because the voting block is down here in LaSalle or DeVoe. So they really don't care about the areas down, which should be, these core neighborhoods should really be the most important part of our city. We are the face of Niagara Falls.
Well, got to interrupt, but I don't live in Niagara Falls. But when I go there, I take that Grand Island Bridge down the Robert Moses, and the only place I end up is Memorial Parkway. The only place.
That's
and I
right.
see those beautiful houses, great bones of structure, vacant, boarded up, garbage and diapers on the street. Ruth, that's the only impression I get of Niagara Falls because I go there for that.
And I think I also believe there's such a, especially from our politicians, there really seems to be a failure to utilize the state to help us with these issues. These are the experts, like when we went through the financial restructuring board and we did, like our block club did review that. Yes, we did have a local panel and kudos to them, but New York State chose the best people for this restructuring board. One of them happened to be Matt Driscoll, who literally is responsible for cleaning up the city of Syracuse in probably less than 2 years. These are the people that sit on that financial restructuring board, but yet the council failed to follow through with anything in that. And again, with all due respect to the local panel, they still are not the experts. The state had the experts.
Hey,
So
Ruth, let me just interrupt there and say why. Because you cannot, as Bob said before, you get exhausted. You're doing this for free. You're just concerned, but after a while they beat you down. You've got another job to do. You've got a life to live. You have 5 city council people, and I don't know how many staffers, and 85% of a $100 million budget. Nobody's doing it.
Right.
You've got 5 people and nobody comes to Memorial Parkway. Nobody experiences what I experienced of driving down Memorial and seeing
the behavior that they see in my neighborhood would not be permitted in theirs. All 5 of them, and I'm including the mayor, if they had a tenement house next to them with laundry hanging over the second balcony, chalk all over, like all you got to do is turn down from Walnut, the first 3 houses. That looks worse than anything we've ever seen in our neighborhood, not just coming in from the Robert Moses. That behavior would not be permitted in where our counselors live.
Ruth, let me tell you, I used to host a TV show, and Sam Ferraro was a bigwig in the county, and he's passed on now, and I'm not blaming him but I invoke his name because a real human being told me this on video, that the casino, when you approve it, will fix all those houses around the casino. It will organically grow into Wizard of Oz.
Right.
I haven't seen it yet. I don't know what Sam meant, how many years it would take.
Well, it was the same thing with the Niagara Arts and Cultural Center, the NAC. Like the creative class, like our neighborhood was supposed to be the artist district. But yet the NAC didn't resolve to do anything.
Well, they did.
Yeah.
They offered private studios to artists who could, afford it.
Right.
But that didn't seem very community to me.
I don't think that it, that and the hospital. I mean, we have the anchors in our neighborhood, not just the casino, but we have the hospital and the NAC. But who wants to come into a city where we can't get basic services?
Mm-hmm.
To me, that's the number one issue. I realize that we have budgetary problems, but what about a little process management? Do we have the people running our departments? Are they capable of saying, okay, I'm going to lose 10 people. How am I going to get the street cleaner down all of these neighborhoods? So you have to put in some processes and maybe change some processes in order to deliver those services. I've seen, this was kind of like a running joke when they used to have the Zoom team. We sat on a porch one time, Zoom pulled up. They got, maybe 8 or 10 guys got out. They started cleaning up properties that were phoned in and ticketed Like, and then 72 hours later, they came through. Three times during that day, the whole crew popped into their trucks, loaded everything, and left. They'd come back like an hour, hour and a half later. So we finally went over and we asked them, what's going on? Well, they get, the team leader told us that we get a call from a councilman, their neighbor, or they got a call from somebody, and they want this taken care of, soon, right now. A block club, another block club would pick up the phone and call, and we need this taken care of right now. So we also interfere, like we have council interfering, we have block clubs interfering in the day-to-day assignments of our workers. That costs, number one, it costs money. We wait in our neighborhood. We would never, ever make a demand that we want something done and done now, and then take it further to a councilman. We put our time in just like everyone else. If it's going to take a week or 2 weeks to get that tree down, then fine. One thing I do know, if there is an emergency, our city does act. I mean, and that's because we had a tree actually in front of my house. These guys came out like the day after Thanksgiving and took that tree down. I didn't even realize it was a problem. The whole tree had split, and they just happened to see it as they were driving by. So, I don't want to just beat up the public worker, because they're doing the best they can with what they have. But we still need some leadership to sit down and say, okay, we are having a problem getting that street sweeper out. How can we fix it?
Ruth, I've heard this before, and I'm not putting words in your mouth, but something you say made me think of this, where I've heard a city council person say, we're a poor city, deal with it. I mean, some version of that. Do you think we're just a poor upstate city where, Bob sees people without teeth, and there's a diaper on a front lawn and there's a syringe on the street? Deal with it. That's where we live. Is that what we've come to?
Personally, I think it's a lack of a combination of work ethic and knowledge. A lot of this enforcement thing isn't really a big, it's not a big spend, but you have to have a legal department. And so that when you do get a complaint, the legal department will follow it up and take it to court. And then let's find out. I mean, if we can't get the court, if we can't go to court and then get the court to say, yes, what you did is wrong according to the ordinance, and then also that it tests our ordinance. Is our ordinance legal, right? We haven't put it to the test. So it's not a big spend, but it does take work and it does take knowledge. I'd like to just go back to a more macro point for a second. And when you talked about the casinos, because, a lot of times people say, what's the number one problem? Well, it's jobs. You hear that all the time. It isn't jobs, all right? Because you got the jobs when the casino opened up. Some people that live here, work there, you would think more would, because it's so darn close. So it's not that the city necessarily needs to have jobs. It could be a successful bedroom community. You've got jobs in Buffalo. You got people commute. It's not a big deal. Okay, so that's a San Diego thing. They don't think in terms of miles. They think in terms of minutes. It takes me 20 minutes to get there, right? It takes me 30 minutes to get there. There's your commute. So with low cost housing stock, you would think that those people would want, there are some people who couldn't afford that $200,000 home, could come here for 50 or 60. Of course, we've seen prices go up. Buy something here, fix it up, and you got yourself a beautiful home. So I don't buy into this thing where we've got to be this big employer, although we do have big employers, right? So why aren't those people staying here? So it isn't so much the jobs. We got the jobs, for example, with the casino. You think, gosh, I could walk to work, take a bike to work in the summer, whatever, but they're not. They're coming in from Williamsville, Amherst. I mean, people are driving to go to work here. The better jobs, like probably like your dealers or your managers, things like this. So that's why I don't think it's a jobs issue. It's just, how attractive is it here? How safe is it here? Those are the things that make live, work, play. But it's not. If you can afford it, you're not going to live here.
Mhm.
Right. That's the bottom line. If you have money, why would you come here? Because if you come here, you've got to have a lot of money to be able to make your home. It might be a good deal when you buy it, but you have to put a lot into it to make it livable again.
Mhm. You know, let me ask you guys, because block clubs, for one thing, are generally like, hey, the house next door is vacant and this can't stand, you know, the diapers and the syringes. I don't know if I've ever seen a city where there's 70 acres vacant by design by an absentee landlord with no plan to ever put anything there that we know of. And it's been 20 years. This isn't a year or 5 years. What's up with that? When I come down the Robert Moses and take a right and the casino's on my left and desolation is to my right, it's by design and purposeful. It's not even, oh, geez, you know what? I got $1,000. I should buy a plot of land and build a house and raise my family. You can't do that. It's already encumbered, specifically desolate. What's up with that?
And the city seems to have allowed it forever and ever. I've never
Three
known a
mayors,
city.
3 or 4 mayors. You elect a new mayor and it's the same thing.
There has to be a new ordinance written. I don't know if they'll, we're kind of jaded on ordinances now because we worked really hard on the short-term rental ordinance and it seemed very fair to us. And then they just poo-pooed it. Like they never paid attention to it. They never cited anyone who hadn't registered. They never closed anyone down. They just let fights break out or whatever, and then blame it on Airbnb. So if we had a new ordinance that addressed a vacant property, how long exactly is it allowed to remain untouched? 6 months, 1 year? Certainly not 15 or 20 years.
Well, and usually you're fighting a lot of fights. The house next door is owned by somebody in Cleveland. The other one is owned by somebody in Brooklyn. You're dealing with 70 vacant acres owned by one place, one organization. I've never seen this before. What do you do about that? Why do you put up with that, is what an outsider says.
Well,
I'm not sure how much, on a local level, I'm not sure how much we can do, like how much we can do, like even with our politicians, but there's no reason why our council and our mayor can't seek some type of relief through our, like Senator Orr and Assemblyman Morinello. They are our contacts at the state level.
Okay, the 4 of us are sitting here on Sunday morning, and what? We know this. You're telling me, I'm not blaming you. You're telling me Senator Robert Orr, the 4th most powerful person in all of New York State government, doesn't know what us 4 know? I don't buy that. Everybody knows where the liquor is, Mr. Ness. What?
You know what?
That whole thing with the big piece of property. First of all, it's America, Milstein, right? It's America, and he's got the right to hold that property. And there's a phrase, an expression that says, money goes where it's treated right or where it's treated best. Just like people, you go where you're treated well, and money's not treated well here. So, I mean, I remember when we first got here back in 2003, I'm going, a piece of land in California, you're looking at 150, 200,000 for a little piece, $1,000. I said, oh my God, I could go into the subdivision business with $1,000 for a piece of land, right? Oh, it didn't take me long to figure it out. It's a reason why it's $1,000. So until the political dynamics of this city changes, this is a drop in the bucket to somebody like Mr. Milstein. So, and he's got the right to hold that property, and he mows the lawn and he pays his taxes. So it's easy to vilify somebody like that, but there really are reasons, why it's not being developed.
Wow. I don't know. I don't want to live like that. I don't want to live like that.
Well,
you can't defend.
A lot of people have made that choice and they've moved.
Well, exactly. How can you build a city when no one will come there because of that? If that's the problem, I'm not coming. And sure, it's America. And sure, it's America. I can spit on the sidewalk. I can call somebody a pejorative name. I don't want to live like that. That's not the America we really want.
Right.
Sheila, what were you going to say?
I was going to say, Main Street. No, you can't tell me that whoever owns all that property in Main Street had every right to sit there and let it do nothing for 10 years. I don't care what country he's from. That's just criminal, immoral behavior. But when I hear people who have lived here all their lives talk about the secret to getting Niagara Falls back to success, they always want something really big, like a new convention center, or maybe the Bill Stadium. No, people, you've got to start really small. You've got to start taking the decrepit house and turn it into a bakery, or you know what I mean? Make it a community, bring in something small where people can walk and have things available to them. As far as the tourists are concerned, New York State has claimed Niagara Falls as the place they can make money in the park and the place they can dump everybody who doesn't have a life. They don't want our city to develop. I really think they don't, because they care more about bringing in every stinking unfortunate that can live here and be a bad citizen and a bad neighbor and never have a consequence. Never. Housing court, they let everybody go because they don't have any money. Well, if they don't have any money, why don't they get out and do something like clean a field, or mow lawns, or work in Hyde Park? Why? Because we have this little union problem. When the citizens of LaSalle tried to go over to Hyde Park and do some gardening and spruce it up, the city jumped in and said, you can't do that. The union people will have a fit.
Yeah.
Well, what are you going to do?
I get so passionate, but it's only out of wanting, again, out of ignorance. So I'm not yelling at anybody here, or even yelling at anybody in power. I just don't understand certain things, and I want to understand them. But, in the time remaining, I already know in my heart that block clubs need to be bigger, better, stronger. And take less time. It can't take somebody's entire life to run a block club. But I was a little surprised when I reached out to try and find out more about block clubs. I was actually told we can't give you any names or addresses of people involved in block clubs because we can't.
That's ridiculous.
Well, it's kind of what I thought, because you're in this business to be connected. Facebook just, let 500 million people's social security number, get hacked by somebody. So I can't find out who Sheila is, but that was the answer. So, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. I couldn't find. Now, obviously, we'll find each other. That's what we do. How do we build this up if we do need to? How do we connect people in 2021 to find out? Like, again, I like to say all of us are smarter than any of us. I have none of the answers. All of us have about 1% of the answers. Put us together and we'll fix the vision. How do I help? How do we get more people to know what block clubs are? Is there a way? We can't quit.
Well, for me, I have to start going up and down the street and trying to enlist people.
It's door to door.
It's door to door, and say to them,
and I think also, I think it's also getting people to step out of their comfort zone to tackle some of the more uncomfortable problems that we have, such as the poverty. We have to start having real conversations about the conditions in this city, because like when I talk to my neighbors, they'll talk about like what the problems are. They'll blame this institution, that institution, and they're right. But how do we get the right people at the table to discuss it? Such as the poverty industry that we have. For many, many years, all I heard is, well, they're poor. Well, I don't care if you're poor or not. Throwing diapers out a second floor window onto the hedges in the front of your house has nothing to do with poverty. Mm-hmm. When we have a whole population of people, you know, like you want to talk about jobs. We have generational welfare in this city, and there's no incentive to take someone, or there's no incentive to go to work for 12 bucks an hour or even 10 bucks an hour when they get everything they want. You know, like, so now I'm getting off the beaten track, but I think we have to have some really serious conversations in regard to this.
Well,
Myself and Bob and Sheila, we have sat on
that's what I was just going to say.
we have sat on more committees. We have been
So many meetings.
Yeah,
The
so
time
many.
for- The time for talk is done. The time for action
Yeah.
is now. We've talked these things to death, Tom. We spent 2 years with this, what is it? Creating a healthier Niagara, trying to get home ownership, increase home ownership and we sat with people that were with code enforcement, with the police department, with the city councilors, 2 years, meeting once a month for
It
2
was
years.
longer than
Time for
that.
talk is done. We came up with solutions. Nobody wants to embrace those solutions. In fact, one of the solutions, I'd have to really get it because it's been a few years now. They actually do it with the OTDA, the Office of Temporary Aid and Disability. They employed this particular method of, it's sort of like they do like an autopsy or a report card. They ask questions like, what do we do? What do we do? How well do we do it? And are we any better off? And it's those three questions that you set up. And then from there, it goes to, okay, well, what have we done? What can we do better? A quick example just is they found that the teenagers were seeing a doctor. It's a routine kind of, I don't know what it was, but they said, come back in 3 weeks. It was important. They found out that the return rate was very low. And so what they did was they shortened up the time period to 2 or 3 days. And they found that, oh my God, the percentages went right through the roof. So that's, it's those kind of metrics, but that's work. That takes a certain amount of knowledge and commitment to solving a problem. And also saying that, yes, it's a report card to see this is where we were last year. Are we better? It's not so much to criticize as it is to say people do want to get better. Most people want to get better. So it's a measure, it's a metric to get back. So that was discussed. We had a man from UB, I think. He was a epidemiologist. He studies like ants and things. I forget what God, was he good. And he introduced us to that thing. That's why he was on it, and we did nothing with it. Nothing.
So I don't want to cast blame. The blame game's done. The culpability game begins, though. So when you talked, for 2 years on something and it never happened, who one human being.
I think we need, again, we have to go right back to having some really honest conversations, and a lot of it is follow the money. We have so many non-for-profit agencies in this city that have been afforded money from state and federal level to do programs to help the poor over the last 10 years or more. And there's been no significant change. So we have to be able to step out and say, why isn't this being done? Okay, so not to make light of this, but there was a gentleman down on 7th Street. I'm sure everybody read it in the paper. The naked man on the porch for 3 years. A man, once they boarded up the house, then he moved to the porch, and then he lived under
the basement.
And then he lived underneath the porch. But yet it was a horrible thing. 90% of the time he was on the porch naked in the summer, doing all sorts of nasty things. The neighbors, they called community missions, the hospital, he also had he lost a leg, because of, freezing, they called the county. Nobody wanted to take responsibility for it. But one of the things the neighbors were able to do is they figured out that at least 2 to 3 times a week, the police would be called. They'd come, they'd take him to the hospital. He would be, he'd go through the hospital. There's money right there.
They made money on it.
emergency. They made money on him, and yet he still lived on the porch.
You know,
That to me, there's like a human,
right?
there's really a violation of human rights in this city, and nobody wants to like, who is accountable for that man?
There is so many things wrong with what you're saying.
Right.
The guy needs help, first of all.
Right.
Nobody's helping him. This is a cry for help if you ever saw it. But we don't have to go to San Diego, as Bob says. This doesn't happen in Clarence.
No.
This doesn't happen in Amherst. It doesn't. It's not like they do when we don't hear about it. That is allowed in Niagara Falls. It is not allowed in other places.
Yep.
You don't know sometimes what you're living with. This is so, Bob. I don't know how we get to Bob's thing of the time for talk is done. Okay, what's the time for? God forbid it's not to pick up a gun and take action. That's not what Bob meant at all. No. We're not going there.
I don't think we should stop talking either. But I'm saying if all we're going to do is talk,
no,
then like a guy like me, after doing that for that long, guess what? I'm done.
Yep.
If you're not going to take action, what's the point? Because once you start working on a plan, there's plenty of discussion there too. But when are we going to get to the point where, we decide on a solution and we actually work it through, Tom? And I don't mean stop talking, but you know what I mean? Eventually you have to say, let's do something.
Here, let me go back and plug my own life. So what I want to do in the Civics Project is come up with that kind of a plan, Bob, of not a whole plan. I don't know what it is, but what is the first thing we must do before we can do the second thing? What is it? It might be code enforcement. It might be something else, but it is something that we don't know. If you're a project manager, you would do first before you would do second. You can't do the second before you do the first. We have to get to that.
I think it doesn't matter. I don't think it matters what we do first, really. I think we need to.
I think we have
The word is do.
Right.
No.
Do something.
No. Let me just say,
Yeah.
We all have to be on the same page is the only reason that there needs to be one.
Correct.
Ruth has to help Bob. Bob has to help Ruth on the same issue until it's done.
That's right.
We have so many issues that we won't be able to fix any of them.
That's
I think if we start small, like, first of all, the people, meaning the block clubs, what's left of the block clubs, we have to have a win. Meaning we have to take, to me, it's a simple little thing, but it will make a big change in how people perceive our city. And that is our clean neighborhood ordinances. If we could, like, we have an opportunity this year, we're going to have three new counselors. We're going to have 3 new counselors. We already have one that's been appointed. If we can get our council, because they represent us, if we can get them on board to start putting pressure on the administration to come up with a plan to enforce our clean neighborhood ordinances. I'm sorry if you're poor. Okay, I'm sorry if you're poor, but if you're wrecking a neighborhood with trash and garbage, you have to be punished for this. Yes, we can hold the property owner accountable because in New York State, it's the property owner. But if you have a good landlord that's trying to teach these people to make sure that their yards are nice and clean, and you go before the judge, we have to be able to sit in front of the judge and say, listen, this landlord is a good landlord. He didn't mean to have this family moved in. Now look at the mess. It's the tenant that should be held responsible.
Yes. Let me just say, though, in closing or whatever, that, we have a team of 5 council people and 1 mayor, and they're the team we have. It's like the Sabres, the Sabres aren't doing very well, or I think that those people deserve every opportunity right now to do what we want, what the city wants. But the city probably isn't telling them what they want yet because there isn't that first, second, third, fourth. I think if the entire city went to those 5 council people today and said, we need this fixed, I think they'd listen. I really do. They're human beings. They want to get reelected or whatever. They their own self-interest. I think what we don't have is any focus. We have a million things we need fixed because we do. They're all important. So there's the conundrum. The time for talking is done, but the time for prioritizing might be now. And I don't know what that priority is.
Whatever people will get behind right now, like you said, just pick one thing. It doesn't have to be your immediate.
It has to be a winnable. It has to be
Right.
winnable. There has to be, you know, like Sheila said, we've had Niagara University for 3 years coming down and cleaning up the neighborhood, and a week later it looks the same. Well, let's start with the city. Go, you know, again, we have the ability to issue an appearance ticket to these people that are, you know, trashing up our neighborhood. Then let's do it. And let's that way people can see, oh, they go down to 5th Street where Sheila lives, and it's not all covered with trash and garbage and, you know, or 13th Street alley over in my neighborhood, which has become a dumping ground for the city.
So Ruth, let me say, because we're out of time, but we have to look at it from 30,000 feet and pick something. And I'm stunned that the city of Niagara Falls has never declared its intentions. Is it a tourism city? What's your number one industry? I mean, we can all argue about it, but they don't have, nobody has said that.
We have parking. We have parking lots.
We're a parking lot.
But we need money. Money's important. If we're a tourism city, everything gets filtered through that. We can raise money from tourism. We can support tourist businesses. That to me would include cleaning up all the neighborhoods. But that's like, you know, right there. We have to have clean neighborhoods because so people don't get, you know, scared.
Tom,
So, yes, one last, you give the final word, Sheila.
the state doesn't want to help us. That's my final word. The state takes every penny from the park. We don't even get a quarter for every ticket of made and missed. We get nothing.
Yep.
They don't care about the city. They're not going to help us. We can go to Angelo and beg him, but he hasn't done anything yet. So I'm not waiting.
Thank you, Sheila. Bob, thank you. Ruth, thank you as always. I hate to cut it short. We could talk all day, but the time for talk is over. I'm gonna actually brand that as a moniker in a less threatening way. Thanks, guys. I hope it's certainly not the last time we'll ever talk.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tom.
Thanks for
Thanks
having
for your
me.
interest too.
All right, bye-bye.